Right. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, the members of our academy, friends, folks, family, tribe, welcome to the opening session of the 2024 Climate Finance Academy. Um, my name is Gennaro Godoy. I'm from Chile. I'm one of the contact points for the Finance and Markets Working Group, and I'm here with Esohe.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Esther. I'm from Nigeria and I am the director for this year's Climate Finance Academy. It's nice to meet you all. Okay, so we are going to be walking you through what the Climate Finance Academy is, which I believe you already know, but just for fun sakes, we're going to be walking through the housekeeping rules. That is everything we expect you to do during the course of this session. So the very first one is to keep your microphones muted. So we do understand that sometimes when you join the call, it's for the very first thing you do is mute your mics. The second one is turning on your camera, if possible. So when people are speaking, it's a bit weird when they're speaking to like blank screens. So we do encourage you to turn on your cameras. The next one is if you have any question or whatsoever, please put it in the chat box, and then we will be we'll be the one reading the questions out to the speakers. So in order to make sure that almost every questions are being touched, because we do believe that some of you might have similar questions. So if anybody types a question and you also want to ask something similar, you can actually react to that question. Do you understand? So we know that okay, this question is of importance because more than one person wants to know the answer to that question. And then the last and final one is to remember to fill the attendance form, which we're going to be dropping during the course of this session. So don't forget that the attendance, 80% is what will actually make you graduate from the academy. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Isohe. Well, we are 200 people in this training program, and we have the mission of engaging you to have a meaningful engagement track along with us in the UNFCCC and prepare us to defend for intergenerational equity. But what is intergenerational equity, and what is meaningful youth engagement? Why is this important? And these are the questions that we'll be exploring today. In our Climate Finance Academy. And Sohe, maybe you can give some quick introduction of the agenda.
All right, so for today, we are going to be having, let's say, like 3 sessions. So the very first one is where we're going to be having Leila, which is the Presidency Youth Climate Champion. She's going to be coming to speak about basically just opening words and what is meaningful youth engagement, considering the level at which she stands. Then for the second one, we are actually going to be having Francisco, which is a children activist, and is going to be coming to speak about like giving us a perspective on intergenerational equity. And then for the last session, we are going to be having someone from UNICEF talk to us about basically child responsive finance, and that is Reyes Lopez is going to be talking to us about child responsive finance. So that's the 3 segments for today's session. The session is 2 hours long, so we do hope that you are able to like there'll be breaks in between, obviously, but then we do hope that you're able to like follow along, take notes, and then if you have questions, like I said earlier, write them in the chat box. Okay, so sorry for the people asking about the attendance link. We have not dropped it yet. We'll drop it.
Yeah.
Okay. Jen, can you go to the previous slide? Let me just give a quick explanation on what the Climate Finance Academy is. Now, what the Climate Finance Academy? I do believe that if you're here, you have an idea on what we do here. But just for the sake of fun sakes, what the Climate Finance Academy basically is a series of capacity building sessions that the Youngo Finance and Market Working Group does every year. And basically, we bring in experts and they come to talk to us about really trending and pressing issues related to climate finance policies and technicalities. In previous years, we have trained only 100 youths, but seeing the importance of climate finance in this year's COP, we decided to increase the number to 200. So we are training extra 100 people. So that is just the difference from this year's academic to previous years. And also, like I mentioned, we're bringing in experts to give insight and creating a space to discuss climate finance negotiations and adjacent topics. If you are interested in the previous sessions, we do have everything uploaded on our YouTube channel, which we're also going to drop the link on the WhatsApp group. Yeah, we're going to drop the link on the WhatsApp group, and you can also watch it there. Yeah, next slide. The problems and solutions. So basically, it's our biggest capacity building effort by the working group. I dare say our biggest project if I'm not mistaken, and then facilitating meaningful engagement and creating sustainable synergies for our advocacies. The Climate Finance Academy is something that we all dear to our hearts in the working group, and we put in a lot of effort to plan it each year. Next slide. So the timeline for the academy. So I believe you might be familiar with a lot of these timelines. So the very first we started on June 15th to 29th, where so before this, I don't think it's included. We did do a recruitment for volunteers. So then it was just Jen and I, and then we did a recruitment to create our team, which you're going to see later on. They are like extremely wonderful people. So we did first recruitment for our team as volunteers to work on the academy, and we got around 30 people, less than 40 actually. We got less than 40 people to work on the Climate Finance Academy. Then now starting to the timeline you are most familiar with. That's June 15th to 29th. We did the finalizing of the draft, the speakers and partners. That is the topics we wanted the academy to focus on. Then from July 2nd to July 20th was when the application opened and was when it closed. Then July 20 to 28 was the period when we had a second application phase and we selected their participants. Now to today, which is no, now to August 9th, we changed that, which is the session one and the welcome. So this is currently what we're having. Then August 12th, we're going to be having the workshop one, which is defining your meaningful youth engagement. I'm going to be talking about that at the ending of this whole session, which is next steps. Then we have subsequent sessions. I know some of you are very interested in Article 6, that's carbon market. We do have workshops, sessions, and everything planned. Don't worry, the academy is really packed and everything can be found in the syllabus. Next slide.
All right, so this academy has a purpose, and we'll try to convert you into climate finance activists and hopefully also climate finance practitioners. So these are the series of activities and outcomes and how we're going to be measuring this. Because this is a project we want to keep track and not just have one session or a couple of sessions when you just give you knowledge, but also kind of like track how is that knowledge impacting in your engagement and how does that after causes changes in the way that also we engage as a constituency and as a working group. So yeah, the slides will be available to see. Afterwards, we're gonna publish them in the WhatsApp group. So stay tuned. Now, so ahead. Oh yeah. Also, as requested from one of our members, we wanted to show you the diversity of our cohort. So you can see that there's a balance of distribution of what ages people are, what gender, where are you coming from, and different regions and countries in the world. So you can see that we are almost in every corner in the world, but we were happy to have this kind of of a representativity of different countries. So now I saw hey, you can introduce Leila.
All right, is Leila in the call?
Yes, she's adding
All right,
her
great.
here.
All right, hi Leila. So before I introduce Leila, I want to read out a bio. So Leila, sorry, before you speak, let me introduce you properly. So for our very first segment of the session, we are going to be having Leila Asanova. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So Leila is the youth climate champion for COP29 Azerbaijan. Ms. Asanova is the chairperson of the Non-Aligned Movement Youth Organization and has previously worked as head of the Secretariat of the Non-Aligned Movement Youth Organization and Program Coordinator and the Institute for Development and Diplomacy at ADA University. She holds a master's degree in public administration and graduated from the United Nations System Staff College and the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. In her role as Youth Climate Champion, Ms. Azanova will amplify the voices of youth-led and youth-focused organizations to ensure that they are mainstreamed into climate diplomacy and COP processes. She will also work with Yongo, the official children and youth constituency for the UNFCCC to empower children and youth and promote youth participation in climate action. Please let's welcome to the first session of the Climate Finance Academy, Leila Asanuba. Hi Leila. Please confirm if you can hear me.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Did I miss anything in your bio that you'd like to say?
Thank you so much. I will not be taking much of your time, just to quickly introduce myself, as you have already did. Thank you so much. And I will just to make some important points that would like to highlight for the opening of the Finance Academy. So, dear friends, young Go friends, colleagues, thank you for inviting me to join to this timely, very important and innovative Climate Finance Academy. Kudos to all of you. I'm going to take a moment to give you some background as to my journey that sees me providing these opening words. As young people, we are particularly and unfortunately vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. But we are also an integral part of driving forward the necessary solutions, climate solutions. For many, many years, young people have actively found ways to participate in the UNFCCC processes, while at the same time simultaneously advocating for greater and meaningful inclusion. Since its inception, Yango, as the only one official children and youth constituency in the UNFCCC process, has consistently advanced these priorities. And I find it encouraging that parties have listened and are increasingly recognized the role of children and youth as agents of change in addressing and responding to climate change. Building on language, in the decision from COP26, the Glasgow Climate Pact, we saw that explicit call for youth representation in decision-making processes, including under the Convention and the Paris Agreement. An annual mandated youth-led climate forum for dialogue between parties and young people is currently in the process and was also agreed upon. I'll speak more about this in a moment. A step further to COP27, we saw the first ever COP presidency youth envoy appointed, which was followed last year by a youth climate champion role for COP28. And by the end of COP28, parties finally adopted a decision to institutionalize and formalize the role of the presidency youth climate champion within the UNFCCC process, with the primary role and main goal to further facilitate the enhancement of meaningful, inclusive engagement of youth in climate action and working as a bridge between youth and presidency. And that's how I came to be appointed as the first presidency youth climate champion as requested by parties to the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement. This foundation of the role was originally built by Yango, now includes another component that as young people, we and our allies can continue to build upon towards mainstreaming meaningful youth involvement across the various climate processes. As the COP29 Youth Climate Champion, I am prioritizing creating spaces for more dialogue, empowering youth through capacity building, and lifting up your voices at all levels as a contribution to strengthening meaningful youth engagement. Getting us back on a trajectory in line with 1.5 Celsius will require a whole of society approach, including children and youth participation and their voices being heard. Since assuming this role from my consultations with young people, it has been made abundantly clear that while examples of good practice actually do exist in some countries, more effort is needed in many countries for young people to be meaningfully engaged in the next round of NDC submission process, which is NDC 3. Young people are calling for this involvement to be undertaken in a holistic manner, encompassing the whole NDC life cycle from planning to implementation and tracking and review process. I will, in my capacity, continue to work with parties, UN partners, the Yango NDC Working Group, and other organizations to advocate for more meaningful inclusion in NDC planning and, as important, the implementation of it as well. To this end, with a focus on the region that COP29 is being held in, we are working with the Youth Empowerment in Climate Action Platform to deliver training on NDC policy development, as well as opportunities to engage with NDC policymakers and to participate in a technical forum with NDC policy experts for a cohort of young parliamentarians. Going back to my earlier point on which I mentioned about the Youth-led Climate Forum at COP29, we have started already discussions with Yango and other partners to develop a program that will culminate on Children and Youth Day on 18th of November this year. I'm also working closely with the COP29 high-level champion to help mainstream youth perspective across the global climate action agenda during COP29 and beyond. And finally, I am speaking to you today on the final day of the COP29 Climate Change Summer Camp, which is currently hosted in Baku. And now on the sidelines of that camp, I'm addressing you, where 70 young early career educators from around the globe, from around the world, came to Baku for an intensive training on integrating climate change education across all curriculum and in school communities. This was an amazing experience for them and me with the support of partners from the Greening Education Partnership and UNDP to design and deliver this training, which lasted 4 days here in Azerbaijan. And I'm more than committed than ever to continue advocating for the support, capacity building, and funding that young people need to tackle the challenge and take up the opportunities of transforming our societies and economies for the better. I look forward to learning from you today and thank you all once again and wishing you all a fruitful session.
Thanks so much, Leia, for that insights on how the Presidency Youth Climate Champions got into place. We are super proud and happy to have been part of the process and now see you there taking the role and really like giving your most effort to make the most for youth engagement at COP29. And we're looking forward to see you there. We were super delighted as well to see the interview that you conducted with Simon Steele last week. Where he mentioned 3 elements of examples of how youth can engage in climate action and the UNFCCC. He mentioned the voice of youth and how important he was. He made the call for accountability of governments, the need for actions on how youth can direct engage to drive climate action, both in the UNFCCC processes, but also most importantly, and the local and with the homes and the communities. He also mentioned some challenges, but I want to maybe ask you, after having this conversation with Simon Steele, maybe what are your thoughts? What is your like your emotions coming to COP29 and engaging with youth?
Thank you, Jen, for your question. Well, engaging with Mr. Steele is always a pleasure and it's always inspiring because realizing that he's the executive secretary of the UNFCCC, realizing that this person who actually holds power in this secretariat and in the convention is caring about education and empowerment of youth voices is very much impressive. It actually it gives inspiration. When we gathered here in Baku together with Mr. Steele, he mentioned so many points. He mentioned the challenges that we actually are aware of. And what he says, he said when we were going out, he said that, okay, Leila, it's hard job. It's really complex. It's really challenging, but don't give up. Because you guys, the youth, he meant, you guys can do lots of stuff which can actually drive and make a change by participating, by learning, by being educated, and just as presidencies each year should be supportive to youth. That's what we are doing actually this year as well. And previous years you have seen that the youth voices come to the culmination. I mean, this is the peak of when youth voices are heard at the COP processes, and definitely there is always room for improvement. That's why we are there. And this is the thing. So it was really impressive. It was really inspirational to just have a quick chat with him and realizing that it's important for him. It's in his agenda as well, as he is the decision maker.
Well, thank you so much, Leila, for those words. And thank you for taking your time at the same time that you're in the climate education camp back there in Baku. Yeah, we're quite privileged to have you here. Thank you. Now we are going to go to a little activity. And Leila, you can go or stay if you want. We're gonna have a little activity on Menti. So if you be kind, go to Menti. I know you're all used to using this platform. I'm gonna be sharing my screen so we can see the code is I'm gonna put it in the chat as well. 1 second. Okay. Here's a link to go directly, but the code is right here. All right. So the code is 71944870. And we're going to respond to this question before I give my own personal thoughts about what intergenerational equity is. I want to know in a few, what defining words is intergenerational equity for all of you, because this is one of the most important advocacies or areas that we advocate on in the UNFCCC and with our governments. Everything related to meaningful youth engagement is also trying to contribute to intergenerational equity. And I want to know from you. So we're gonna give a few minutes for you to be able to put some inputs. Great. So we're looking at fairness, justice, sustainability, justice with our generations, effective solutions, caring about the future, making a change. I love it. All of these are completely right. That's exactly what intergenerational equity would mean. I love to see it growing. We have already 140 responses. Gender equality, opportunities for youth, eradicating overconsumption, cooperation, inclusive decision-making, effective use of resources, respecting youth, thinking long-term. That's really important. Okay. Thank you so much for that. That is super useful because that's one of the topics that we engage so much on and continue to drive policy about. And it's gonna come useful, and we're gonna explain about that in a second now. So can you see my screen? Yes. Okay, great. So we're gonna talk about today about intergenerational equity and meaningful youth engagement. But I wanted to give a quote from Tobin, an economist, about the role of trustees. And why this? Because we in a finance and markets working group, we look it through the perspective of financial institutions, the role of the financial system, and so on. And the quote that the trustees of endowed institutions, so the person that are managing the funds that are given by the population and society to be handled by these institutions, those are the guardians of the future against the claims of the present. Their task in managing the endowment is then to preserve equity among generations. I think that this highlights the critical role that trustees play in ensuring, how you said, the long-term sustainability of this funds, these resources that should be look at the long term. And it comes to every institution that does this kind of efforts. Could be foundations, could be central banks, could be charities, could be even universities that are taking this role. So it's a responsibility for this kind of ages to make sure that the current needs meet the future requirements. And the reality is that when we see the last IPCC report, the assessment report, the synthesis report for policymakers, is that we can realize that loss and damages are happening, are being observed and widespread, substantial impacts related to our daily lives. And this, you can see that maybe in your territories, the scarce availability of water or food or fishery or ecosystems being affected, more disease, heat, mental health issues. And we are experiencing these changes in an even more accelerated way that we thought. And as science are evolved, we need to also evolve our ambitions towards tackling these issues. And us as our generations, we need to quickly implement those solutions to survive, essentially, because as you see in this graph that represents essentially the challenge and the fact that intergenerational equity as a basis is not being ensured, is that the next generations will live a world that is way more heated, affected by global warming and climate change. And then
Right.
and so we need to be ready to respond to these issues. And as Leila mentioned, that there's like we have the goals of the Paris Agreement, which is aligning the increase of temperature to no more than 1.5, no more than 2, and hopefully less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. But we also have the rest of the Sustainable Development Goals, which there are different kinds of pathways the society and economies can take in order to reach these goals, but it depends on multiple complexity of multiple factors that influence and especially conditions that constrain the individual and collective actions. So we need to take care of those, and that's the kind of reforms we need to think when we're talking about the financial system and the reforms and the new collective quantified goal for climate finance that's going to happen this year, where developing countries need that aid, and we need to look at the whole of society approach to make sure that that aid comes not just to the governments, but also to the vulnerable communities that are suffering on ground. And there's so many different kinds of ways that governments can take policies to align financial flows, for example, which is Article 2.1c, and kind of like guide society and private sector and then the rest of the economy to reach this. We're going to be talking about all of these in our sorry. Can you see my screen, right? Yeah. Okay, great. So we're going to be talking about all of these reforms and all of the roles of these institutions and different agenda items that we care about in this Finance and Markets Working Group in the next sessions. But the truth is that our generations are going to be responsible for those, or actually implementing those changes in the next decades. And we're going to be there, not just suffering on ground and creating the solutions, but also being the leaders and political leaders in these institutions that will actually make this change happen. So that also calls for us to be prepared. And we thank you all for your motivation to be here on a Friday. And train yourself to engage meaningfully, to influence society and make those changes happen so we can actually align those pathways to where we need to be in order to make change happen. And the reality is that, like youth are all over the world trying to do this. And it's crazy when you see this kind of graphs, when you see how this distribution of people trying to get capacity building, and they're not just trying to train themselves, but they're actually doing action on ground. Like at least half of the people that are being trained, according to some data that we got from another course, are actually implementing projects, youth-led climate projects, and at least 3/4 of those, they said that those projects can be replicated. So the potential that youth has to make change happen is a reality, and the fact that we are happy about the contributions. In the next session, we're going to talk about how youth has been involving their engagement in the UNFCCC and NDCs and so on, with the youth stock take. But the fact is that our projects on ground are not considered as part of the pledges from countries or the contributions to climate change. They're like kind of like invisibilized in most of the cases. And you can see in this graph, for example, that there's a wide variety of different topics that youth are engaging in education, food systems, management, gender, you name it, nature-based solutions. We're dealing with these issues on ground and with the rest of the social sustainable development goals. But we face the problem that we don't have enough access to climate finance to replicate and to make these solutions sustainable economically. As only for one of the reports of the youth climate justice reports is telling us that just 0.76% of the climate finance from the largest climate foundations are going to climate justice or locally led youth-led projects. And that is shocking, considering that we are the ones leading our communities and suffering this the problems of climate change and the effects of extreme weather events. So the fact that we are not accessing enough funding is it's a problem, and it's something that we need to work on. And there are other kinds of reforms as well in the financial system that we have to see happen. And luckily, there are some processes, like, for example, the UN Tax Convention, in order to unlock the enough finance that is needed to reach all of these goals. Now, we are going to have another mentee. So I'm going to stop share screen, and I'm going to pass the mic to Esohe for a brief mentee on of what meaningful youth engagement is. Oh, Esohe, you can come in and say hi. Are you still there? Okay, I think she she maybe had some technical problems, but I'm going to continue then. So if you go back to your mentee, now we have a second question, which is about what does meaningful youth engagement means to you? Because it's maybe we can draw abstract on what meaningful youth engagement is, but what's important is what would you want to be meaningful youth engaged and in order to actually make the changes or aspirations that you have. Can I resend the link? Yes, I can resend the link. Let me just copy it and put it here in the chat. But thank you so much for all the responses so far. We see that youth purposely engaging, influencing policy decisions, taking role in policymaking processes, collective actions, of course. We're all together in this, so we need to work together. Having an active role in decision-making, hearing our voices, passion, sustainable economic growth for youth, shared leadership, that's super important, that we all feel safe also to engage in this kind of spaces where you can come with your ideas and come with your proposals and actually act upon. And I'm going to talk about the Finance and Markets Working Group in a second, as well as one key space that you can engage in the UNFCCC for to have that shared leadership that we were mentioning. Engaging in official negotiations, as observers, you can also become youth negotiators in your countries, empower and prepare future generations, community-wide networks. Yeah, these are amazing inputs. Thank you so much. Because these are very useful for our research and our work, which I'm going to explain now. So I'm gonna share my screen, my other computer. Here we go. So I hope you can see my screen again. Yes? Okay, amazing. So we are going to, where's my mouse? We're going to talk about the Finance and Markets Working Group. This is our space in the UNFCCC from the Children and Youth Constituency, which is one of the constituencies of the UN, but it's focused on the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. If you want to participate in other processes, like let's say the ECOSOC forums or the environmental assemblies from the UNEP or the biodiversity COP, there's other constituencies that feed to those processes. So you make sure you can engage in those spaces and get to those spaces. But here we are in the Finance and Markets Working Group of the YONGO, which means youth NGOs, those NGOs that are accredited to the UNFCCC. And we follow and create common positions for the UNFCCC negotiation tracks related to climate finance and Article 6, which is carbon markets. How much constituencies does the UNFCCC have? Well, there's at least 8 constituencies, and you can see there's one for businesses, researchers, farmers, trade unions, women and gender, environmental, local municipalities, and so on. So what we do is, like, as you can see, we create capacities for youth to facilitate meaningful youth engagement and provide inputs. We have this paper. I'm going to talk about this later. So we have a flat structure. That means that there's no hierarchies between each other. We're all in the same position when we take decisions, and we're based on consensus. That means that we need to be working along on deciding things together. And of course, this is sometimes difficult, but we address that each voice is equally important, and meaning that that our voices represent all of us as youth participating in the space. And we are also the oldest and largest constituency of the UNFCCC. But there's not only finance and markets, but there's also other working groups as well for each thematic topic that you might want to engage in. And you're super welcome to join Yango. In our social media, in our webpage, there's forms to join. But there's also local kind of spaces that they're built to get youth together to engage, which are the local conferences of youth, LCOYs. Which also write a national declaration that is very important to engage with your national governments and let them know of your positions and how can you drive climate policy and what are the risks. But there's also regional conferences of youth, and then represent the voice of the entire region, and it might be super relevant to feed into the climate weeks, the regional climate weeks that are happening. We have this youth report on how youth has been evolving in their engagement throughout the years that we're going to talk about next session on the 12th. And we have a global youth statement, which is our main policy document that we elaborate each year. And it feeds from all the processes I mentioned before on the LCOYs, the RCOYs, the working groups, and everyone that is joining the hackathons on their online sessions to give direct input to this statement that then is sent to all of the heads of delegations. But we also do the same for the intermediate sessions of climate change conference, which happen every year at Bonn. And we made our first SB 60 position paper this year. You can also find this in our webpage. And these are some examples of submissions that we do in a working group. This is our main goal, to get this documents to then feed to the processes so the negotiators can know of our positions and taking into account what we're discussing. But we also do advocacies at these events. So from the protests that we do on ground, we arrive with the proposals into these spaces. We intervene in negotiation processes, in the plenaries of the convention, and we participate in events. We have bilaterals with stakeholders like financial institutions or parties who also, talk more personally about our positions and see how they can support our agendas. And we do actions and demonstrations on ground, of course, and there's legal spaces to do that in the conferences. And these are just some examples of how we can also get like media cover and even like members of parliament joining our actions on ground, which is quite inspiring. And if you're new to the space, don't worry, that we're here also to help and to provide help for you to make sure that you learn what is the process and what are our positions are youth. So you can also access, well, I'm going to share the presentation where you can access this link so you can find all our previous position papers on the topic, so you can start studying for your engagement. And now I'm going to pass the mic to Sheen. Sheen, are you here in the meeting?
Yeah, I'm here, Jen. Hi.
Great to have you here, Sheen. Maybe where I cannot see your face. Wait, let me look. Okay, I'm gonna, yeah. All right, Sheen. Sheen is our director of research in our working group. So I would love to have you introduce yourself and talk about the work that you do with us at the Finance and Markets Working Group while I look at the presentation.
Amazing. So, hi everyone. My name is Sheen. I am joining in from India. And as Jen mentioned at the very beginning of this meeting, we have representation from everywhere, of all ages, all genders, cultures, backgrounds. And so I am happy to represent Indian youth in the working group, as well as be a young person striving for change. So, for our research project, we basically focus on climate finance, seeing how climate finance is a huge issue for youth nowadays. So, moving forward, we have been working for the past 2-3 years on reports, and our reports have been divided in 3 sections. The first report that was launched was Youth Needs for Climate Finance, which was launched at Innovate for Climate by World Bank Group in 2022. And this report focuses on what the youth needs. And we extensively interviewed youth, and we tried to understand what it is that they want, what it is that we all need. Moving on, once we analyzed the needs, we worked on understanding the availability of climate finance. This was done in collaboration with the Commonwealth, and this report analyzed around 100 or so funds. And there were a lot of factors that came into the picture. For example, where are the funds based, or what are the restrictions on the funds, what is the amount, and so on and so forth. And you will find very insightful details in this report as to how dire a need of climate finance it is right now, seeing there is hardly any availability of climate finance for youth. So this was a very insightful report, and it was launched at COP28. And right now we are working on the third report, which is focused on accessibility. So the purpose of this report is to bring together the youth's perspective with a fresh input, seeing how that report was 2 years ago. So this report brings together the youth's perspective as well as the fund provider's perspective on how they go about with the process of applying and actually receiving the funds, and then kind of understanding the intersection of both of these perspectives and providing recommendations on what it is that we need to target for good amount of climate finance being available for youth. And that is it for our research project. We are very much looking forward to having people who are uh, involved in research work, who have either prior experience, or who are even fresh but are willing to work hard for youth and work on this report. And even without the consideration of this third report, we do have upcoming new reports, and we would love to have you on board. So I think Jen will share more about how you can join us. And yeah, all the best with your academy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheen, for those inputs. It's quite useful to know what we're actually working on. So maybe our cohort will be interested in participating. And if it's this what you also want, maybe we can invite to design a future workshop to engage in this kind of reports or to exercise on how can we support these kind of reports. But kindly let us know in the feedback forms when we give the attendance form. About this, if this is the actual thing, what do you want, if this is meaningful for you. This is quite important for us. Am I sharing screen again, Ian? Yeah, right? Yeah, great. So in the presentation that we're going to share, is available, the main findings of the first report and the second report as well. You can see that it's quite clear that the beneficiaries is of how many youth are being included in the finance is not reported. And this is a problem for a topic that we're going to be talking about now, which is children and youth responsiveness in climate finance. But first, I want to know if Francisco is there. Francisco, are you there? Yeah. No puedo destacar. Francisco, ¿estás ahí?
Hola, hola, sí. Hi to everyone. How is it going? Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Genaro. It is a pleasure to share this floor with you and with all the people present here. Also with Grace, that I think that he will come after me, no? And with Leila. Thank you so much for the space to basically tell you my experience from Guardianes por la Vida, Guardians for Life. I will start by presenting myself, by introducing myself. My name is Francisco Era. I'm 15 years old right now, and I'm from Colombia, but I live in Barcelona. And basically, when I was 9 years, I could see from my own eyes the planetarian crisis. Basically, Colombia is one of the countries, the most biodiverse countries in the world, basically, and it's amazing to precisely see from first hand the degradation of the environment that in which you grew up and in which you have lived your entire life, no? So in that sense, being a witness of that crisis from a first-hand testimony, I decided to create a movement, Guardianes por la Vida, Guardians for Life. And Guardians for Life is basically a movement that have a main essence, and is a movement for children, led to children, but also by children. Yes, I mean, it's 100% by children and for children. Yes, that here is the question, because here, of course, we are talking about youth, and we have a lot of young people, no? But now I will tell you a child experience, let's say, a different experience, because sometimes we use to put together these two age populations groups, no, children and youth, but they are different. The physiological conditions and physical conditions that characterize each of them are different. Children are even more vulnerable than youth, than young people, no? So in that sense, as I was telling you, when I was 9, I invited to 6 of my friends from the school to go to the streets and to protest, basically, for the lack of public policies to tackle the planetarian crisis in the local context. I live in that time in Villeta, a little town like 90 kilometers away from Barcelona. And since then, basically, we have dedicated all our energy, all our efforts to basically build this movement based on the concept of the eco-hub. Yes, the eco-hope is basically a concept that I have written in my book that seeks to promote the action. No, we know that we are going through a very difficult moment for the whole humanity. We have not just to face the consequences of the planetary crisis, which includes the climate change, the loss of biodiversity, and also the pollution. But also we have to confront the war, the famine, and the pandemics, among many other issues. So in that sense, the EcoHub seeks to use the force of the chaos to basically act, no? To attack basically the eco-anxiety. Is the opposite to the eco-anxiety. And in that sense, right now we are leading three main projects in different territories around Colombia. One of them is, for example, the Gardens of the Eco Hub, precisely. The Gardens of the Eco Hub, which consists in a project that seeks to strengthen and improve the relationship that children have with nature, no? We know that the only way to take care of the planet is basically getting closer children to the nature and to the biodiversity, basically, because as a great phrase says, we cannot defend something that we don't know and we don't know first. We must first to know something, and then we will love it, and then we will defend it, like a family, like I don't know, like when you know when you in a universe, you we understand it basically. The idea is simply that children have to have more spaces with nature to connect and to understand the issues that we are living. No, we cannot solve a problem uh, without knowing how is that problem going, how it works, how yes, what is it even, no? And in that sense, it is a big challenge, taking into account that by, for example, by 2050, the 70% of the population will live in cities, no? And those cities do not, let's say, adapt their context to the biodiversity. So the children are growing up in urban areas, in urban zones, without any kind of contact with nature. And that's very bad news. So in that sense, we are, let's say, having a double impact in the territory, in the ground. We are, first of all, improving, enhancing that relationship with nature for children, but also we are combating the extreme malnutrition children are suffering in Colombia, basically. Because, for example, the last year, more than 100 children died precisely. The lack of action from the state to provide them the basic needs, like food, no? So we know that with climate change, this will continue getting worse. So in that sense, also, we have to take into account that climate justice means, for example, food security and social justice, no? And understand the integrality of the issue, of the climate issue, no? Is not something is something that is interrelated with many other problems of our society, like peace with nature, no? But additionally, during that long path, we have get a lot of challenges. We have noticed and we have seen how the finance, the climate finance, is being more and more monopolized. Yes, it's like a monopoly. Yes, it is very difficult for not young people, but for children to have access precisely to phones. And it's something that I can tell you from my experience, and it's not an opinion, it's an experience, basically, a reality and a fact that we have lived, and is that the phones, the climate finance, falls in a few hands. So in that sense, in many occasions, we have seen precisely how the money doesn't doesn't get the territories and the communities, no? And in many other occasions, also another very difficult and great challenge has been, let's say, that Eurocentric perspective, no? Europe and the global north has a historical debt with this global south. And despite we know that they have conquered our lands and they have exploited our territories, and they have get out basically from our land, from our countries, a lot of resources, and they have benefit from them. No, now they have the money, but when they come to our territories, they say to us that we must do what they want. No, so I say this because in many occasions the initiative that in for example in Colombia are being carried out are not consulted, are simply an imposition from the global north, and this cannot continue happening because we need to, of course, implement the money to execute it, but we need to do it with the communities. We need to design the projects with the communities. And for example, with the indigenous communities that have a lot of knowledge, basically. I have seen the passion with which children talk about nature, but indigenous children, they have built for centuries a very great relationship with nature, and they have a lot of acknowledge to precisely make the projects to improve the conditions of the territory and to take care of the land, to defend the land. Additionally, also, something that have been very difficult is the age, of course, no? As you know, also to participate, the age is always a limitation, and also to get access to the finance. But the idea is to make as many efforts as we would have to make to make these projects 100% led by children. And we just not have the gardens of the Eco Hub. Also, for example, have another project also with the access of the Eco Hub, which is Reading with Eco Hub, which seeks also to promote the environmental literacy among children in 4 municipalities of Colombia. And also, in previous years, we have carried out, of course, many other projects. For example, we did a school. The name was the Citizenship, Environmental and Climate School, also led to children to basically endow, provide them of the basic tools to meaningfully participate of the decision-making processes. Because of course we know that also the language that in these processes is used is not very easy for children, and also in many cases for young people, no? So also to basically build the necessary capacities that children need to have to participate and to contribute in a meaningful way, in a substantial way, and for example take advantage of the ancestral knowledge that many in the indigenous people can contribute to the discussion and to the design and the execution of the projects. No, what else? What else I can tell you from our experience? Well, I think that additionally, of course, we must to recognize that we live in an adultocentric society. So in that sense, is another challenge to even just the fact that our children, they're ones that are leading this place, because many times the only fact of being a child makes adults questionate themselves about the legitimacy of the project, yes? So it is very important to basically emphasize that this is not a concrete problem, it's a structural issue that we must change. It's simply the mentality that children also have an agency. Yes, is what we must to understand. That of course we always hear from the young people and about the young people and about children that they are the most vulnerable, no? That they will suffer the worst part of the climate crisis. But we also must to recognize that they can also make a contribution. And in fact, this is not something that could happen, that in fact already have happened, and we have seen a lot of movements that have made many changes and transformations in the national, local, and international level. I think that in fact I will read, if you allow me. We have a declaration, the declaration of the Eco Hub. Again, everything goes around the Eco Hub, but I will read a very interesting part of that declaration. It is in many languages. It has been mobilized with more than 13 governments at the highest level all around the world. And basically, there is a very interesting part that reminds me to what I am saying, basically. I don't know if I can share the screen, if you allow me, Gerardo, and if you can tell me also if I'm already extending myself or if I yet have
No,
time.
you're super well on time. We're actually a little bit early. You can share your screen now, and I also have a question for you. Just wanting to know.
Thank you,
But
Genaro.
but go ahead and read
Well,
your declaration. Thank you so much.
nice. Because I think that this declaration was created precisely in an assembly that we did inside our movement. They are the own words of children that belong to our movement, and it says, despite the sluggish progress in, let me take off this thing now. Despite the sluggish progress in integrating our voices and agendas into arenas of participation, representation, and political influence, we lament that we continue to be marginalized West in the discussions that supposedly consider us. This exclusionary treatment extends not only to governmental bodies, but also to entities purporting to work for children and infancy. It appears that the motto remains by the children, for children, but without children. I want to stop here and emphasize in that phrase. Is by children, for the children, but without children. And here is the question also with the finance. The finance is a key element in the fight against the climate crisis, no? We are fighting against something that is bigger than even a war. Yes. And if you know, I don't know if you know what Napoleon said about the war. What do you think that are the three main elements that Napoleon said that we need to win a war? What do you think, Gerardo?
You tell us, Francisco. Francisco, are you there? Can you hear me?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, my internet was a little bit bad. What are these principles for winning a war?
No, that's my question for you. Tell me, what do you think that are, I'm asking you, or if anyone wants to write it in the chat.
Money?
What
They're
do you
saying in
think?
the chat.
The first one. Tell me the first one, for example.
First person people are saying money.
Money. Nice. The second one, tell me the second one you think.
Oh, empathy. Are saying.
Empathy.
Wow.
Well, for Napoleon, in fact, there were three main elements. The first one, you were right. We need money. The second one is money. And in fact, the third one is money. So that's the question. We are fighting against something that is worse than a war. The climate change implies climate refugees and many other consequences for the survival and for the existence of the humanity. So this is worse than a war. And in that sense, we need more money. So I just put this example to explain my vision about the finance and how important it is. And also how precisely children are being excluded from the climate finance. One of the latest report of UNICEF that I think that Erase then will tell you about it, says that just the 2.4% of the climate multilateral funds has been led to children. And that's a very bad news, precisely. We need to change that at home and to start thinking more on children. Children are not just the future. We are here and we are demanding our inclusion. So that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Francisco. That was quite inspiring. Everyone's loving you in the chat. You mentioned a lot about eco-anxiety, eco-hope, the health and environment rights of children, and your personal example as a children-led action, you know, and the need that we need to enable those conditions for children leadership and participation, and also that systemic change and justice that we need to bring in our financial and economic systems, and to connect with nature defenders and indigenous peoples. Those were like my highlights from your intervention, and I love them. But I wanted to ask you if you would have like the leaders, the CEOs or presidents of financial institutions or governments in front of you, what would you tell them in order to enable those conditions for meaningful children participation and leadership?
Well, what I would tell the global leaders simply is to stop the war. Yes, I think that no, it is really a question of willingness. Yes, when we want something, we can do it. Yes, and even more if we are talking about the leaders of the war precisely. We have declared the war to the life, and that is translated into images really impacting. For example, the degradation of the environment in general, no? The deforestation, the loss of biodiversity in general, no? And I mean, these wars, climate change, loss of biodiversity, are like really general, no? But then you will see those images in your head. So I invite you to imagine what I am talking about, no? And not just the war against the nature, also the war even against children. Yes, even the war, as the Secretary General of the United Nations has said, have rules, and those rules are being violated by some states around the world. Right now, we are living the highest level of violence since the end of the World War II. More than 55 conflicts around the world are carrying out different states. In fact, my country is in an internal war, in a wave of violence. So this is the war against the life, and is the moment to stop it and to put our energies to focus on the important stuff. The important stuff is the climate crisis, is the famine, is the hunger that thousands of people are living. And it's, of course, also many other issues that with all the money, imagine if all the money of the wars around the world would be led to the climate finance. That would be a huge amount. So that's what we need. That is what we need, basically. How is possible that following the data from the Office of the Secretary General, the loss and damage fund that was created the last year in the COP28 just is equal to the salary of 9 players of the Arabia Saudi team of football. That's amazing. The whole amount is equal to the salary of 9 players of the football team of Saudi Arabia. That's incredible, but it's a perfect example that tell us the inequalities our world live. Yes. So that's it. Simply what I would tell the global leaders and what we must to tell them. That's my invitation. Don't lose the eco hope. We need to, the challenge of our generation is to recover the eco hope and to return to the generations, to our generation, the confidence, the trust on a prosperous and peaceful future to build the peace with life.
Oh, that's really, really powerful, Francisco. Thank you so much for being here with us. And we'll gladly invite you to any of our next engagement opportunities and event, and happy to be in this fight together. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. We are going to now pass to Reis. So Reis, ¿estás aquí? Are you here? And Esohe, are you also back? No, okay. She's having technical issues with her internet. But Reis, good to have you here. A long time. We're here, Francisco and Reis, we're intergenerational panel, truly.
And suddenly I'm feeling so old with you guys.
No,
It rarely happens to me, but today I'm feeling quite old against Francisco. Thank you for sharing your very interesting and kind view on what needs to be done, and again to lead this group, and all of you to be here. I think you represent the acumen of skills, thoughts, ideas that we need to tackle climate change. I think it's no discipline is outside, whether it's mathematics, it's art, it's sociology, finance, of course, we have a role to play. So very keen for this, to be part of this conversation. And I guess carrying over with the key messages of Eco Hope, and I guess on how we plan for the funds to have better and more nuanced approaches toward children and youth. I'm going to delve into this presentation. So I'm going to ask my colleague Kelly if she can put the presentation on. And well, I did introduce myself, Reis Lopez. I'm a regional advisor on climate change based in Panama. I cover Latin America and the Caribbean. And I've been working on the climate finance realm for the past, I would say more than 18 years, feels a lot. And I'll explain, this presentation will cover, I guess, two main focus. One is the imperative for climate finance to become child and youth sensitive, and the other, some data around that. So next, please, Kelly. So we have been talking today about climate justice, and we have seen the unequal impacts of climate change, of extreme weather events, slow onset events towards children and youth. We have heard about the different historical responsibilities that the global north, the global south have, but within that, there is also age brackets, right? Who, and especially women, youth, children tend to be the most vulnerable because they lack access to tenure, access to land, access to resources, finance, etc., which make them more vulnerable. We also heard about triple injustices. It's not only the impacts, it's also about how we respond to that, how the organizations, governments, private sector responds to this, in some cases without really having consultations, having information of the most vulnerable communities about technology and so forth. These responses can exacerbate inequalities. And also the burden we have seen with the new hot topic on the agenda, loss and damages. Well, there are like some some losses that not a level of mitigation or a degree of adaptation can suffice. So we are really moving towards a very unexpected, unexperienced path on Earth. So we will see that the extreme poor, the most vulnerable communities will suffer most throughout these impacts. And then we have seen how justice is, I guess, distributed depending on the process, on the distribution, depending on the costs and the outcomes. So this is kind of also a new area in UNICEF. Just to make a very slight comment, we're working to see, for instance, how child protection systems, civil registration, for instance, have an impact on climate change. And these translate on different knock-on effects. Not having an identity, you cannot require health services, you cannot require different other services. And this, you have seen this on the human mobility on the migration side. So in general, we have seen there is a clear data and arguments around the need for climate justice to be at the core of the negotiations. Next slide, please. Then I'll focus on 3 examples why climate finance needs to focus on children and youth. It's a rights-based approach, it's a moral approach, and it's an economic approach to it. Next, please. These slides come from an analysis that we did globally, where we argued that the climate crisis is a child rights crisis as it impacts climate extreme weather events such as heat waves, cyclones, floods, water shortages, vector-borne diseases. They have different impacts, but at least and not only, there are like compounded impacts. As you have seen this table, you have impacts on water resources, the intensity and the frequency of cyclones and hurricanes, the expanding territories of Zika and dengue, how heat waves have becoming really prominent in some regions of the world. So we have seen that this is really impacting not only children's ability to cope, but they also require the services to fulfill their potential. When you think about health and nutrition, when you think about water and sanitation. And you have to realize that children tend to be the most physically, psychologically, and mentally more vulnerable than adults. So I think this is also another nuance, another angle on the vulnerability. We have seen also how climate change, and you have seen on the news, in my time, I guess years back, you could see on the news climate disruptions happening every other, I don't know, 2-3 months. Now it's on a weekly basis when you see that flooding can affecting energy supplies, the provision of water, the provision of health services, and children need this to really not only survive, but to thrive. And within that bracket, I guess we have seen there is data that particularly extreme poor children, especially girls, are affected given the fact of having less means to bounce back of these shocks. And also when you add the lens of not only gender, but ethnic background. At least we have seen in Latin America and the Caribbean, indigenous populations, Afro-descendants tend to be, and people with disabilities, the most impacted by climate change. So this is a right-based approach that we need to continue to focus, because all humans, we have rights holders that should be protected and should be fostered. Next slide, please. On the previous one, there was the previous one, Kelly. There was a fairly kind of like new analysis that NFCCC did on the impacts of the newest generations. And here, as you have seen and you have talked on many other fora, is how a generation that is born after 2020 will face the world. What does it mean that where you live have less access to water, less access to agricultural land, where these impacts could maybe trigger migration? So there is a grim scenario ahead of us, especially for the newer generations. So the focus to really have the needs of the future generations in the current negotiation, it's key because it's for them to really witness and suffer the developments of the harsh developments on a warmer climate, on a warmer world. Next, please. Then focusing on the moral, moving from the moral approach to the economic approach, this graphic, it's not really that known in the climate governance on the climate realm, but I think this is really important. Heckman was an economist who did a lot of analysis on the need to invest in the early days, in the early childhood. And Heckman won a Nobel Prize. And the main argument is that for every dollar that you invest in early childhood programs, meaning education, meaning health, meaning nutrition, there is a return of the investment of above 13 US dollars.
I think we've lost Race, or is it just me?
No,
I think we lost him.
As well.
I think it's everyone.
To promote a better human capital and for children to have a better understanding of the environment, having better skills, tools, and to be part of the solutions.
Sorry, Rage. We lost you for a bit when you were referring to the 13% return on investment. Do you mind going back to that?
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. I was saying that, yeah, from $1 that is invested in early childhood programs, a 13 US dollar return has been seen. So for that, it's really keen and needed for governments and for the climate funds to focus and to understand that education, health, nutrition, water, sanitation have a really keen role to play in the fight of climate change. Next, please. So what do we mean by child responsive climate finance? And it's, I guess, threefold. We expect for when interventions and programs are developed, explicit and meaningful consideration of children and their needs needs to be given. Also, as I mentioned, we expect that these funds focus towards strengthening the resilience of social services, education, health, nutrition, water, sanitation, and so on. And of course, throughout the process of these programs and project development, there needs to be consultations, formal consultations with children and young people as key stakeholders of these processes. Next, please. And then I will move to speak about the global and regional report that we did on climate finance. And I'm gonna put on the chat the two linkages so you can have both reports easily and readily available. Next, please. So for the report, I'm going to focus on the one that is quite similar to the global one that we did for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we analyze the funds that are known to be the financial mechanism of the convention. which is the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environmental Facility, the Adaptation Fund. And we did an analysis of roughly 600 projects for almost 16 years, from 2006 to March 2023. And we saw very interesting data on this, as you will see. From the allocation that was assigned globally throughout these 16 years, only 80% came to Latin America and the Caribbean. Next, please. And you will see that on the following slides that have same analysis globally. When we did the analysis on how these funds allocate towards interventions that focus on child, youth, and girl-sensitive projects, we saw that from those a bit more than 9 billion that were allocated to the LAC region, only 743 billion were allocated to projects that incorporate child and youth responsive activities. When we did a more granular analysis, focused on only specific to child responsive activities, the figures reduced drastically to 305 millions. And when we focus on how out of these almost 9.5 billion that were allocated to specific activities towards girls in LAC, in Latin American Caribbean region, only 32 million over 60 years. That's really nothing. It's absolutely a pity. And the overall analysis shows that globally, climate finance from these funds, only 2.4% is child responsive. The figure is rather a bit higher in LAC, but really very low, which is 3.2. So we are really trying to work with these funds and all the agencies that access and implement these funds to have a more granular approach and more sensible approach towards children and youth. When we analyze how these funds are responsive also to youth, to children and youth, as you see on the extreme right figure, yeah, the majority is not responsive, to a lesser extent limited, and just only a very small amount irresponsive to child responsiveness. So there is a lot of work to be done. So I think it's important to have this conversation, and we are really trying to make our beat working with governments globally and with the funds for them to focus on this. Next, please. And then when we do the analysis at the social sector level, it was a bit shocking. From out of these almost 9.5 billion that were allocated to Latin America and the Caribbean, over 16 years, $0 came to health. None, zero. So climate finance is not looking at health. For them is not. You can argue that they don't see a role of health. They don't have intervention related to climate, which is a bit really sad and misleading, no? And then you saw others, education, and here education, you'll see maybe more investment. However, education tends to be the analysis, we need to be more granular. It's sometimes is not towards education systems, is not towards the parts of the system that requires investments such as curriculum reform to integrate climate change, training of teachers on the indicators that the education system measure, tends to go to trainings and maybe trainings to government staff, which is okay, but it's not the actual education system. So there is kind of a nuance to be made. And also another grim area that was underfunded is social protection. And for all those who knows in this call, well, social protection schemes tend to really focus on the extreme vulnerable, the extreme poor. So we need for these social protection schemes, such as food or cash transfers, to really focus on how climate change is impacting the most vulnerable. There are like some cases, I think, in Pakistan and India, but I think we need to be more impactful. And I think the key analysis here, when you see social protection, health, and education, my recommendation is that most of the ministries where the climate change agenda is decided and shaped and defined, these sectors, they don't see, or these ministries, they don't see the role of health, of social protection, or education. So I think it's part of our role as UNICEF to bridge that gap. And also, I guess, UNGO needs to be kind of like putting some fingers on the things that need to be made and sectors that need to be funded. Also, yeah, I will move to the next slide, which is just as part of the conclusions, and to tell them that we're really pushing globally in UNICEF to really to be part of the conversations with our bilateral donors, with governments, to really shape and really scale up child and gender responsive climate finance. I think the gender angle is key if we want to reach the most vulnerable. You can read what we mean there. Also, we need to really improve how governments, UN agencies response to child and youth needs, specific through the NDCs, where we are seeing that they need to send an updated version next year. We're working among agencies to really provide the support. And we see that, and we acknowledge that the NDCs will shape how national budgets are used for different compromises that each country had agreed while signing the Paris Agreement. So this is, I think, important, not only to think climate finance about the climate funds, either public or private, but also about the national budgets. Countries have substantial amounts of resources to invest. So sometimes they need to be provided with some data and arguments to follow a more comprehensive investments. And also, we need to invest on the capacity building initiatives to keep creating and to sensibilize financiers on the need to finance towards children and youth-led initiatives. And the last point is, to facilitate the coordination and partnerships. And this is governments, international organizations, private sector, and so on. So I'll be closing by saying that it's really important now that when you have opportunity, especially coming from the governments, most of the climate funds that I've spoken about, they are kind of demand driven. So if the government doesn't demand, for instance, health related projects related to climate change, as for instance, to do and implement an early warning systems in dengue or Zika, the funds will not promote that. So it needs to be really demand driven. So I urge you, all of you, that within your national counterparts, start conversation about the need to make the linkages of these sectors that are not easily associated with climate change, to have a better and bigger role within the climate finance sector. So with that, I close. I hope I haven't bored you all to death. And I really acknowledge all your support on moving and driving the agenda. And happy to have a conversation if there's any question. Thank you.
Yeah, we're welcome questions in the chat, and I thank you so much, Race, for all your insights and the work that UNICEF is doing worldwide to ensure the rights of children. And I wanted to ask you, again, similar to the question on Francisco, about what policy recommendations would you give to financial institutions, to governments through their NDCs, to start having children and gender sensitivity as part of their key mandates, considering they have to look forward to the future, being able to respond and work on those disenabling barriers or disenabling conditions that don't allow us to scale up.
Yeah, thank you for this. And I think there's different avenues to go about that. I was thinking for the specific finance sector, I'm speaking about the private finance sector, different regions have advanced with different taxonomies that I guess you all have seen. And in some cases, some sectors, again, as education, social protection, health, are not part of those taxonomies. So it's a blind eye on sectors that private funding could be and should be going. That will be one. When we think about the public funds, I think it's key, and the way to go about to increase demand. As you know, each of the funds, the GCF, the JEP Adaptation Fund, they have focal points at the national level, the technical ones. So I think the technical focal points needs to be the one really making a case, an argument of some sectors that are underinvested or need more investing. So that will be another way to go forward. Also, when you think about national public finances, I think that it's another way to go. When you have national budgets and when you have different pots of money at the federal or state or local level, I think it's important to have a conversation with governments. And I will give you one example on that. Recently, I was in the border of Peru, and the local government from the Ministry of Education, they have some funding annually that was given to them. And they used to buy supplies, education supplies mostly. But they have full of supplies that they have bought for the past years. So we were analyzing, we're like, on the visit, we saw that the bathrooms were kind of like really on a really bad shape. And we're like, you should be using these funds, I guess, to repair these toilets, not to supply. So to have a water pump, maybe if it's solar, a solar water pump, to have some supplies for the restrooms and so on. So it's a matter of provide some technical assistance there. So that's that. And I guess lastly is on the private funding. Yeah, and this I guess a tricky entryway. A lot of governments, especially these developed countries or developing countries that are high levels of debt. So they are not willing to take on more debt. So it's really a case and has been a very key argument in the conversations, in the negotiations on the responsibilities, right? Why developing countries or least developed countries need to take grants, they need to take loans instead of grants for their responsibility sharing on the climate change. So yeah, I guess different angles and each one can be unpacked further.
Yeah, thank you so much for these are super useful. You mentioned debt and how nations, sovereign states issue debt to cover some of the most pressing issues. And I think that's one of the clear cases of how we are going to be affected. Because who pays that debt? The next generation of taxpayers. It's us. And there are maybe other ways that could be more innovative, more purposeful to also ensure justice among generations. And I guess we are going to learn more on how central banks, for example, through quantitative easing, can also maybe have a more equitable approach to this, because it's always the next generations are going to pay. But it's important that that it does the less harm possible to their access. And yeah, you mentioned also about the role of investments in industry and infrastructure, for example. And I guess just deriving on what the whole conversation on responsiveness is also that we and children should also be heard on what are the needs and priorities for investments in these industries and infrastructure in a way that allow us to work on it. So these comments coming also from the chat, there's a lot of the issues that you covered. So thank you so much for your participation. And we have to move to the next speaker because we're
exactly.
almost out
Thank
of
you so much. If you have questions, you have shared my email. Happy to respond. Thank you again. Thank you, Yungo. Happy to keep supporting, and kudos for the great work that all of you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to know if Marina and Drew are in the call. Yeah, I see Marina. All right.
Yes. Hello.
You're also there, Drew?
Yes,
amazing.
I'm here.
Amazing. So I'm gonna put you on the spot now.
Sure.
And I'm gonna share my presentation to help you. So please let me know when do I have to change the slides. But please keep your microphone muted, please. All right. So as you can see, now we're going to talk about one of the key policy works that we work on in the Finance and Markets Working Group. Understanding that climate finance, it's not in a vacuum. It doesn't just work on the UNFCCC, but we need to look at the whole of the financial system and the other intergovernmental processes that it can also feed. So maybe I see that Marina is blocked. Maybe Drew, can you introduce yourself, your role in the working group, and also continue with the presentation on our policy work?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jen. And happy to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Drew Johnson, and I'm one of the coordinators with Marina on the International Financial Architecture Working Group, along with Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, which is aligning financial flows with a low carbon and climate resilient economy. Essentially, what we've been doing for the past months is working on a policy brief with the T20. So the T20 is actually, for those who don't know, it's actually an advisory engagement group that works with the G20. And it's uniting think tanks, research centers from all the G20 member countries, and they provide policy recommendations for the G20. And what we focus on in particular was under their working group 3, which focuses on international financial architecture. So we submitted under that umbrella, and we also focus on a subtopic, which is focused on SDG financing, pathways, and the role and reform of international financial architecture, with specific goals to outline pathways to increase funding for the SDGs. So our policy brief fits under that, and the name of our policy brief is Intergenerational Equity at the Center of the International Financial Architecture Reforms, Youth-Led Policy Guide. I know that's a mouthful. But I just wanted to give a bit of that background before we get into what we actually wrote about and what we were thinking in this policy brief. But to start off, when we talk about intergenerational equity, we focus on this in particular, and that's a key focus of Youngo in our working group, to really integrate this and make this ubiquitous in the financial sector, and how can they integrate this into their policies and their investment strategies, things like this. So intergenerational equity essentially is a legal principle that states that future generations should have the same chance to use and enjoy Earth's resources as we do now. So shouldn't use up or damage resources in a way that leaves future generations at a disadvantage. And this idea is key to financial systems and how they operate to create wealth, but also preserve it over time. So we want to focus on, taking this angle and how to integrate it into this basic function of finance. So we have, as part of the policy brief, we did some diagnosis of the problem, and we looked at a few different areas. So we have 3 different focus areas on what we see as limitations when it comes to the financial sector in integrating intergenerational equity. So when looking at limitations of financial planning, neglecting long-term cost of economic decisions, and the need to be systemic and change in order to be effective. So Jen, you can go on to the next slide. Jen? If you could just go to the next.
Oh,
yeah, thank you.
The next one, the number 2?
No, this one. Sorry, that's good.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you. So just also as another background, I think it's helpful to know that intergenerational equity, it falls under, you can go back to the number 1. So intergenerational equity has already been incorporated in some sorts of human rights applications in international law. So I think it's helpful to know that the financial sector actually could be affected by this because, it's part of, for example, the Maastricht Principles that clarify international human rights. So it paves the way for intergenerational equity in international law, and as well as UN frameworks where, such as the UN Agenda for Sustainable Development and also the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So I just wanted to give a bit of that also, because I think it's important to know that financial institutions can actually be impacted by these principles and apply them based on a law-based approach. So yeah, you can go to the next slide, Jen. So a key point in this is that financial institutions, they usually don't look far enough in advance and on a long enough time horizon to make and integrate intergenerational equity into the decision making. So a really good speech that I'm always referring to is Mark Kearney's Tragedy of the Horizon speech, when he talks about that financial sector is fundamentally underpricing and not considering the risks of climate change. But this also applies to intergenerational equity when you're looking at how to preserve wealth, and that's not just financial wealth, but also the wealth of, a clean environment and respecting human rights over the long term. So these time horizons are far too short. So this was one of our diagnoses. To go into the next slide, in the interest of time. You can go to the next slide, Jen.
I think it's on screen.
Maybe my screen is lagging. Okay, I see it. Perfect. Yeah, so building off that first point there, like the long-term costs of our economic decisions clearly haven't been priced in, and financial institutions are not actually facing the consequences of their emissions. For example, I think carbon dioxide is the biggest example when it comes to long-term costs not being considered in the present. So For example, as we know, there's no universal carbon tax. So these could be very high, up until some estimates of around $200 per ton. So this is hindering our ability to price in the economic decisions of the future, and this fundamentally puts future generations at higher costs, like you were mentioning, Jen, before. Who bears the cost? It's not in the present, but in the future. So you can go to the next slide.
It's there.
1 second. Okay, yeah. I don't know why my computer is just like taking a while, but I also have it up and so yeah. So it's the need to be systemic in order to be effective. So in order to do this, we were thinking that in order to produce change, it needs to come from the top down, and there needs to be guidelines and actual policies that financial institutions integrate into their own strategies. So our policy brief, Marina can mention a bit further on of the pillars and the recommendations that we have, because I know we don't have so much time. But just to say that financial institutions, they need credible quantitative targets and metrics to track progress, and we want to think about how we can apply it to intergenerational equity. And actually, so our responsibility is engaging from the youth perspective, and working a bit from the ground up to get these financial institutions to pay attention to this and actually integrate it systemically. So I'll hand it over to Marina if she wants to give a brief overview of some examples and our recommendations. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I have a little bit of problems with my internet, but hopefully everything will be all right. So I'm Marina, I'm from Brazil. I'm one of the other coordinators with Drill of the 2.1C and IFA reform subgroup and the finance and markets working group of Yango. And when we were developing this policy brief, I'll try to be brief in my intervention, but before I go into the pillars and the recommendations that we presented, we also wanted to study and analyze some examples of how financial institutions are already integrating intergenerational equity in their activity. And one of the examples that we found was the Youth Adapt Challenge that was developed together with CIF, that is Climate Investment Funds, and the Global Center on Adaptation. Some of you might know who they are, and the African Development Bank. And they basically implemented this accelerator program to support more than 1 million youth entrepreneurs to fight climate change impacts in Africa. And I think it's really interesting because when they are financing the solutions to local climate related programs that are implemented by youth, that are implemented by young people, they are acknowledging our work as change makers and as part of the solution to this problem that was not even caused by us. So yeah, that's just one example on how one financial institution engaged on youth entrepreneurs and how they integrated somehow intergenerational equity into their work. You can go to the next slide, please. Here, I don't know if I'm on delay as well. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So when you're talking about intergenerational equity, we already mentioned a bit, it can be super generic and it can mean different things for different groups. And as it's a new term, sometimes institutions don't really know inside their work. So in our policy brief, we developed some concrete principles and guidelines so they can really implement this intergenerational equity in their work. And we concentrated, we did it in forms of questions. Questions in 6 pillars. Elements. We cover governance, we cover investments and lending practice, we cover policy and stakeholder engagement, and also metrics and targets, as well as reporting. So some of the questions that we covered in the policy brief were, did they acknowledge does mention intergenerational equity? So do they mention it? Should I turn off my camera for the internet? Maybe that will be better.
It might help, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I can do that. And did they acknowledge some of these principles? Did they not acknowledge? Do they have a just transition plan? And does this plan include intergenerational equity and justice? Do they have dialogues and engagements with the community that are affected by their activities? Do they have a sustainability report? And this sustainability report can not only cover green and more sustainable practice, but do they include social and intergenerational considerations in their report, generally in the end of the year? So overall, when you talk about including intergenerational equity and justice, we talk about like breaking this vicious circles of short-term profit. And we try to include that not only in internal organization, but also in engagement with different actors and investment policies, so that not only the present generations are saved, but also the future ones can thrive. So I tried to be brief, and I'm really sorry about my internet, but that's basically it. And I'm super happy, like I think I can speak to Drew as well, to share more about the policy brief and about how we develop these questions, because yeah, I think they are key and very important if we want to try to make sure that they will actually implement beyond just beautiful words and talking that they engage with youth. And that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Drew and Marina, for that amazing presentation. So since you're done now, Jen, are you there? So you can actually move to the last slide, which is the last segment for today's session. So before we go, I know I've been here for over 2 hours. I want you guys to give me a reaction on how you're feeling. Oh, all right, all right. That's nice. That's nice. Thank you. Okay, so I have dropped the attendance link in the group chat. That's not the group chat, that's the Zoom chat. If you're yet to sign the attendance, make sure you do that. So we are going to be moving on to the next session, which is not a session, it's just rounding up, which is the avenue for engagement in the academy. So I've gone through the attendance link, and I noticed some feedbacks some people gave. Someone said they wished the sessions were more interactive. So I would like you to know that the sessions are more of people coming to speak to you, while the workshops are where you actually do what you're learning. So for our very first workshop, which is happening on Monday, we are going to be having a session on defining meaningful youth engagement pathways. So I want to believe that from what we have learned today or what we've heard today, you have sort of an idea on what meaningful youth engagement is. So we're going to be having a session, and the mood is going to be more of like a breakout groups. It's going to be more breakout groups to select your preferred engagements, identify opportunities and challenges while engaging in the UNFCCC and in climate finance. Yes, the presentations are going to be shared as well. Don't worry, everything is going to be sent. Then for workshop 2, we're having a workshop on analyzing carbon markets projects. There will also be a breakout group activity where you will look at specific climate projects and analyze them. Then we have another one on Article 6 negotiation simulation. Each participant will be assigned a member state, which the participant will be representing in the negotiation. So there are a lot of interactive activities. If you are not very familiar with these topics, I encourage you to actually do your own research way before the time so that you are able to participate. Then we have the NCQG position building, where participants will work on building a position on the NCQG and simulating negotiation. So there are a lot of activities that will be done. Jan, the last slide for why I talk about workshop 1 intensively and who we're expecting. Okay, there's an assignment actually. So this is your assignment. The details will be shared on the WhatsApp group chat on your mode of submission. So ideally, your answer should be written, you type it in a PDF and then send. Basically, that's just it. Your name and then type PDF and send to. I'll send the emails you'll be sending your assignment to. So That's it. Last slide, Jen. No, the one with Elizabeth and Listen. The very last slide. Yeah. So next step for the academy on Monday, we are having this session. The flyer is going to be shared to the group chat where you can post on your social medias and everywhere. So like I said earlier, it's going to be defining your meaningful youth engagement pathways. This is a workshop, and this session you're actually going to be expected to open your mic, like unmute yourself and actually speak and share your ideas. You're going to be working in groups. Like we mentioned, we are going to be grouping you guys, and then you're going to have your community engagement managers. I know a lot of you have been asking me who your community engagement managers are. They have been selected. We are just waiting till Monday when it will be shared right before the session. And then we're going to be giving you an overview on how the community engagement managers work and basically what they're there for. So they'll basically be monitoring you and seeing how you are engaging in the Climate Finance Academy. So we know we mentioned that 80% mix, you have to have 80% attendance. As well, there's also a participation rating. So you need to participate actively in the academy. So if you're telling me you're a member of the Climate Finance Academy and I cannot recognize maybe your WhatsApp name or your actual name, then you're not participating actively. You need to ask questions. If you have questions, ask them. During sessions, if you don't understand something, ask them. If you have an idea you want to share them as well. So basically, this is what it's about. The slides will be shared, the assignment questions will be shared, the email you email the assignment to will be shared as well. The deadline will be shared as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you're yet to sign the attendance, don't forget to sign it. Jen, over to you.
Well, thank you so much for our previous speakers, Marina and Drew. You are key to the work that we do. So I hope our participants also engage with our coordinators because it's gonna be a work that we're gonna continue together in the working group as well as in the sessions of the academy. One of the things that we might and we're working towards it as Leia mentioned in her intervention is the Youth Climate Forums, the first one happening last year at the COP28, which would be a really good opportunity. And I'm inviting the members of this cohort as well to start identifying possible ideas on how can we design this forum essentially to bring together different financial institutions, actors, governments, negotiators, and so on to talk about these same issues that we're talking about here and more. And I think it could be an amazing opportunity for those, of course, that are engaging at COP29 and something that we can all co-create together. Mention that the assignment is not now, so don't worry, but you can start preparing. And for prepare, also in the slides that will be shared, you can also look up on these two documents that we have found on different papers that discuss the intergenerational equity approach and also some potential policies that central banks could make to enhance climate justice perspectives and the case for green quantitative easing, which is a form of how central banks essentially bring money to the economy to solve certain problems in the moments where there's like not recession, but where there's a lower growth or lower inflation in a way that we can channel more finance. So I think these are my last words, and I thank you so much for being part of this academy, for applying, for taking your time. I know this is really hard for everyone in the world that we're here together in different parts of the world to come together in a specific time zone. So it will be, I think that we can take in consideration this as you assign the attendance form. If you cannot make it to a session, kindly message us and you will have enough time to respond to the forms, maybe through the weekend, for the next days and so on. But the attendance form is also a really good source of inputs for us to improve, to help us help you, and help us all together as youth to engage meaningfully in the UNFCCC. So yeah, it will be really nice if you include your recommendations in the form so the team can take it forward. And with this, we say bye to everyone, and maybe we can take a last picture together. So please turn on your camera so we can take our picture.
It's so nice having you guys here. Thank you so much.
So 3, 2, 1.
All right, Jen,
Okay.
I can take a picture.
I have one. And oh my God, there's so many pages here. So bear with me with your smile, please. Don't lose your smile. All right, amazing. So thank you so much. I think that we can stop the recording now, but we can stay here for a few minutes. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, please raise your hand as well, and we're happy to respond it to. And everyone that has to go, have a nice evening, have a good day onwards.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Jen,